Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. An interesting development with Arkansas basketball, although I don't even think this is really an Arkansas basketball story anymore. And let me explain why. So obviously on Tuesday, last day of the college basketball transfer portal, last day that the portal is open. And essentially, I'll be real, with the portal getting set to close, I kind of thought there could be a scenario where basically, for lack of a better term, I thought we could see a rush of guys entering the portal, guys looking for money, schools tampering to get players in, players that are in the NBA draft that want to leave their options open. Well, it's been pretty quiet as far as new entries on Tuesday. However, there was one very notable new entry, and that is the guy that you see on that screen right there, Boogie Fland, who was at one point the leading scorer at Arkansas, also averaged 5.5 assists per game. He didn't officially announce, but it got out that he is entering the transfer portal. So I want to go ahead and break it down. I want to go ahead and talk about it, but let's go ahead and dive in. So Boogie Fland, like I said, 6 foot, probably 6'3" guard, 5-star recruit, was frankly one of the first players to follow John Calipari. I think Carter Knox was first. Boogie Fland was second. But Boogie Fland is a guy that we've been talking about since he was committed to Kentucky, set to go to Arkansas, okay? Well, he goes to Arkansas. He's very good early. The team obviously was struggling when he was playing, but it doesn't change the fact that he was a very good player in college basketball. Like I said, ended the season averaging 13.5 points, 5 assists per game. Those numbers dipped a little bit because he was injured, expected to be out for the year. I thought it in actually a very noble pursuit that he decided to return and play in the NCAA tournament. I thought it would have been easy for him to say, if I play and I stink, it could hurt my draft stock. But he decided to come back. He helps Arkansas. I thought he was actually very good against Kansas, was okay against St. John's and Texas Tech, but he ends up coming back. Well, he enters the portal. I remember we were at the Final Four when it happened. But like I said, transfer portal is closing. And producer Matt, you can go ahead and put up the John Rothstein tweet because I think the verbiage on this tweet is very important. So John Rothstein originally put out, source, Arkansas guard Boogie Fland has entered the transfer portal with a do not contact tag. Fland is 100% focused on the 2025 NBA draft and intends to stay in the 2025 NBA draft, but wanted to keep his options open by entering the transfer portal. Producer Matt, you could go ahead, drop that. Thank you, sir. So there you have it. Boogie Fland entering the portal, but is very much focused on the NBA draft. Well, I bring it up because I want to dive in, and in my opinion here, I think two things can be true. I do believe that in my heart of hearts that Boogie Fland is entering the portal to protect himself. We'll get into why in a second, but that the intention is to stay in the draft and the full focus is on the NBA draft. But just because your focus is somewhere, sometimes money talks, sometimes common sense prevails. And I'll be real, it would not surprise me at all if he was playing college basketball next year. So I think the question obviously becomes, Torres, well, if he's focused on the NBA draft, why would he put his name in the transfer portal? The reason is pretty obvious. It's basically proverbial, not literal, but proverbial insurance. It is in case something goes wrong. It is in case, God forbid he's going through the NBA draft process. What if he, not even anything bad. What if he sprains an ankle and can't work out for 2 weeks? What if he, something weird happens? What if he gets the flu? What if he gets mono and he can't go through that draft process? Well, then he has protection and he can come back to college basketball and his options are open. I think even more realistically is we just got to call a spade a spade. What if his draft stock isn't as high as he thought it was? And if so, does he really want to risk going in the draft, not landing where he wants when he could come back to college? And so I bring it up because to me, I think the latter part makes sense. The first part makes sense too. Protect yourself from injury, protect yourself from this, protect yourself from that. But I also think realistically, I don't know if his draft stock is as high as a lot of people think it is. Bottom line, I went back and looked it up. First of all, ESPN's most updated mock draft. It was a 2-round mock draft. Did not have Boogie Fland in that mock draft. Okay. Bleacher Report, that's what it was, had him as a 2nd-round pick in their most recent mock draft. And so to me, I think, listen, if you're going to be a 2nd-round pick, let me even backtrack, because we've talked about this again and again and again and again and again, but I think it's always worth reiterating, is that the calculus, the mathematics, to quote my old buddy JJ Redick, it's a math equation, F-head. It's a math equation, F-head. And I think the math has changed on this. 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 12, 15 years ago, if you were going to be a 2nd-round pick, you just went. And you hope it worked out, and you hoped you found a spot, and you hoped you landed in the G League. And if it didn't work out, you went overseas and whatever. But you got to make some money somewhere else. You got to make some money, period. And you weren't making money in college basketball. Well, now look at how much players are trying to fight their way back into play college. You have players without eligibility that are entering the transfer portal, hoping that they can somehow figure out a way to get eligible. And so the world has changed. And if you're Boogie Fland, this is the smart move, and I don't blame him. I don't blame him one bit. You're protecting yourself, and financially, let's call a spade a spade. I went back and looked it up because, first of all, 2nd round, sometimes you get a guaranteed contract, sometimes you don't. And if you get the right guarantee, you should go, even if you're not going to be a 1st rounder. But even if you're a 1st rounder, I went back and looked it up. The numbers are insane relative to college basketball. Right now, I went and looked it up. Forget being a 2nd rounder. You know, like the 20th pick in the NBA draft last year is making $2.9 million in the NBA right now. The 20th pick, I don't even know who it was, but I just went and looked at the salary structure, okay? Well, guess what? There's probably 20 guys that are going to be making, maybe not 20, but probably 10 to 15 guys that are going to be making $3 million or more playing college basketball next year. And so forget being a 2nd rounder, forget being undrafted. If you're going to be like pick 15 to 20, you're probably going to make more money playing college basketball next year. Now, obviously, NBA comes multiple guaranteed years, 2-3 year guaranteed deal, whatever. And so I only bring it up because if you're Boogie Fland, even if you were going to be a fringe 2nd rounder, maybe a 1st rounder, the money is going to be good and the money is going to make sense. And you should at least consider it and play college basketball. So the question now becomes, why would you enter the portal and not just leave out, open the option and go back to Arkansas? Well, I'll say this. I actually don't think going back to Arkansas is really an option at this point. By the way, producer Matt, you should pop up the Coach Cal tweet. I think I sent it to you. I hope I did, because Coach Cal did weigh in on this. So Coach Cal said, quote, "I've been talking to Boogie the last few days. I fully expect that he is going to be a 1st-round pick. I've coached players with his talent and know how they are doing in the NBA. He has it. He also knows I will always be here for him." Okay. So John Calipari saying, look, we expect him to be in the NBA. We root for him. We wish him luck, blah, 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 this and that. But part of the reason that I think he entered the transfer portal, I don't really think he's got a spot at Arkansas. And I saw some people say, well, if he comes back to college, he's going to go back to Arkansas. I actually don't think he's going back to Arkansas at all. I actually think there is no spot for him in Arkansas. Arkansas largely recruited over him, expecting him to leave. And let's keep this in mind. I said it on the show on Monday, and I stand by it. I think there was thought even this spring that DJ Wagner, as a 3rd-year guy who followed John Calipari from Kentucky, might not come back because they have 2 more point guards coming in next year, Darius Acuff Jr. and Malik Thomas. And so if you have Darius Acuff and Malik Thomas, and now DJ Wagner is coming back, I don't think there's a spot for Boogie Fland. And so to me, I believe a couple things. One, I want to make this abundantly clear. I believe that Boogie Fland is going to take this down to the finish line. He's going to stay in the NBA draft as long as he can. But what I also believe is that if he doesn't get the guarantee that he's looking for, I think he's going to play college basketball next year, because we're about to talk about the portal in a minute. But here's the bottom line. The bottom line is there are, and I keep saying it, but it needs to be reiterated, there are a lot of schools that have already raised NIL money. And I'm just going to say it. There aren't enough good players for the spots that are still available. We keep saying it, but it's the truth. There's no 5th-year seniors. You have teams that loaded up, that lost 6, 7, 8 impact players. You can't replace them all in this portal. Just think about the rosters right now. I keep bringing it up. Florida right now, they lose Denzel Aberdeen. They have one guard that's playable for next year, Xavier Lee. You think they couldn't use Boogie? And we don't even have to get in Boogie Fland, but let's just get into teams really quick. Florida has one playable guard. Kansas, I think, needs minimum like 2 difference-making guys to be a contender in the Big 12. BYU still needs a starter, either at the 4 or the 2. Who else? Tennessee, I think, needs 2 more guys. By the way, they were going hard after Rodney Rice. He's completely out of the picture. Villanova needs guys. Kevin Willard, new head coach. I mean, you just go through the list of teams, and I think outside of like 2 or 3 teams, I think, listen, if nothing crazy happens, I think Kentucky's set. I think if nothing crazy happens, Louisville's set. By the way, Louisville got back Kayshawn Pryor right before we went on air this year, so I think they're definitely set. I think UConn is waiting on Alex Caravan, and if they get him back, they're done. We'll discuss the Huskies in a minute. But I just bring it up. There's too many teams that need players, and I think he's going to come back. The one school I will say for Boogie, and I think a lot of people jump to the conclusion, and I think it's largely fair. Now, again, I want to reiterate, I think his focus is on the NBA draft. But I think the school that I would at least kind of keep my eye on, it's what everybody's thinking. It's St. John's. St. John's, Boogie's from New York, okay? St. John's needs a point guard. Now, listen, we talked about it on Monday's show. They take Ian Jackson. Rick Pitino says all the right things about he's our next great point guard. He's got big shoes to fill. Kadari Richmond, what about him? Big shoes to fill. Kadari Richmond is gone. Ian Jackson's next, blah, blah, blah. Ian Jackson was not a point guard at North Carolina this year. Ian Jackson averaged under an assist per game. And so I know Rick Pitino has the right intentions, but that was before Boogie Fland was available. So would St. John's make sense for Boogie Fland? Again, I'm not saying it gets done tomorrow, but if you get to mid-May, maybe Ian Jackson's been on campus for a week or 2 and Rick Pitino realizes, I may have overestimated what Ian Jackson is capable of at the point guard position. You think he wouldn't make a run at Boogie Fland? Like I said, Florida needs guards. You think they wouldn't make a run at Boogie Fland? Tennessee needs guards. You think they wouldn't make a run at Boogie Fland? There's probably schools I'm missing. USC just took Rodney Rice today. They probably would have been in the mix. They needed another guard. They had Ian Jackson on campus. Georgia seems to be throwing money at everybody. They had Caden Lewis on campus this week. So I'm just bringing it up because, listen, I think 2 things in life can be true. I do believe that Boogie Fland is entering the portal with the full intention of just protecting himself during the NBA draft process. I believe that right now, Boogie Fland, if it was up to him, he expects to hear his name called the night of the NBA draft, and he does not expect to ever play college basketball again. But a couple things can change, and I think most importantly, the math has changed. As my old buddy JJ Redick says, it's a math equation, F-head. Are you going to be a second-round pick, non-guaranteed contract, playing in, for the main red clause next year for $80,000 or $100,000? You're going to come back to college basketball and probably make $2 million. So we will see what happens with Boogie Fland. But to me, I think that is the most interesting development of the day in the portal. We are recording here at 6:41 Eastern time, 5:41 Central in Arkansas. So stuff is always subject to change. But to me, that is the thing that stands out about the situation with Boogie Fland.